Just give me a wink when we're good to go.
We're live, Chair.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Mark. And welcome everyone. Welcome to the strategy performance scrutiny meeting. I don't know about anyone else, but it feels like it's a while ago since we last met. So welcome. It's good to be with you all. First of all, can I have the names of any subs nominated or apologies, Mark?
Yep, certainly. So we have apologies from Councillor Megan Swift and Councillor Whitaker, and substitutes we have Councillor Smith.
Perfect. And welcome, Councillor Smith. Interests, members, do you have any interests about in anything that's on the agenda? No. If you do, you can always declare it under the item. Number 3, admission of the public. Yes, the public are allowed. We're live on YouTube. Number 4, minutes of the last meeting held on the 23rd of November. Are there any comments on the meeting, on the minutes at all? No. In that case, can I propose them as a true and accurate record? Can I have a seconder? Yeah, Mike, all those in favour, please. Perfect. And yeah, that's passed, you know, of the people in well, it's not unanimous because Councillor Smith, I appreciate you weren't there, so it wasn't unanimous actually, but there we go. Stickler for the detail, Mike, you know. There we go. Item number so therefore it's been suggested before we get onto the cabinet budget draft proposals that we change the items around. So it's been suggested that we put the corporate performance report, we discuss that next, and then we discuss the budget after that report. It might make sense because, you know, because probably the budget will be the meaty item on the agenda. First of all, Councillor Dacre, is that okay with you if we discuss corporate performance first?
Yeah, it makes no odds for me. I'd be here for both items, and it does mean the 2 officers can leave. Yeah,
perfect. Good. Members, are you happy with that? Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. So in that case, Jez, welcome to the board, the best board in Calderdale. Over to you, really.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for rearranging for the order of the agenda. This is the half-year performance report from 22-23 that went to Cabinet back in December. Obviously, would have come in the January strategy and performance scrutiny, but obviously that was a workshop around commercialisation. It's a standard agenda item, and we report against our 21 super key performance indicators, and obviously within that we highlight some exception reports. So things worthy of note within the covering report really are around, we've emphasised some of the work that we do at a regional level in terms of the regional intelligence network, and also talked at 4.3 and also talked in 4.4 around some of the changes to the SKPIs that we've done to reflect, as we constantly do, look at to make sure it accurately reflects the priorities of the council. So the rather blunt instrument, the measure of crime, has been replaced with 3 more granular measures of crime: domestic abuse, serious crime and neighbourhood crime, to reflect the priorities of the council, but also to give a bit more opportunity for a bit more deep dive, a bit more depth and detail going forward, and those will be reported and obviously benchmarked against sort of WICA, the part of the Silver Partnership and Community Safety Partnership, and the Police and Crime Panel. So they're, you know, they're very robust. They're not fairly robust. They're very robust. Moving through the report, we highlighted in terms of the SKPIs at that time, obviously areas that on the RAG rating that were red rated. So the housing obviously was one, and there's talk in there obviously about the work that's ongoing in terms of the housing delivery test action plan and the work in the North Halifax partnership to housing there. Since that time, obviously the local plan has progressed and is progressing towards adoption, or, you know, the final stage, you should say, within the council, and the inspector's report has been received. And in terms of highways, there's obviously some work there around the corridor improvement work that's been ongoing, and again there's some physical and some tangible work around the A629 phase 1B work with the new canal bridge going in down on that part of the programme. So there's quite a bit of work, and there's also been some further funding received to extend the corridor programme from the A629 from Halifax to Ogden, and also some work around the maintenance. So that was one of the SKPIs. So there's we'll look to monitor any change and improvement to the maintenance programme, which affects that indicator as well going forward. In terms of the exception reports, like I said, we highlighted 3 in terms of permanent admissions to care homes, and this sort of really draws out and is further evidence, and again at that time with the data of our approach to promoting independence and keeping residents safe and within their own home for as long as possible. The proportion of older people aged 65 still at home after 91 days, again, over the last 2 consecutive years, an improvement reaching 88.3 in the most recent year, that being the best performance to date, and is worthy of note. So we've obviously highlighted that. And then the primary phase educational attainment outcomes, that really shows a legacy of COVID and the impact that has had on not just us locally, but also nationally and regionally. But it worth highlighting that we are still performing above those other comparable authorities and all other England benchmarking measures against that measure. But it is obviously something that Children's Services and the Children and Young People's Directorate are working closely with in order to bring about those improvements. So overall, in terms of the report, it's highlighting at that half-year stage there are areas that we're performing well. So in fact the indicator around business sustainability after 3 years was performing well, and we were in the top quartile for that against other local authorities. There is still areas that the council is looking to improve and to prioritise. We're not complacent. We are in extremely challenging times. I don't need to tell anybody within the audience here that, in terms of the cost of living crisis and obviously the other once in a generation challenges, and it affected our most vulnerable and residents across the community. So the report went to Cabinet, and like I say, was we bring that here for further comment. Detailed comments and detailed scrutiny regarding specific service issues, obviously we will happily capture those and take those away, and we will respond to anything in terms of the report itself if you have that. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Jez. Thank you very much. Good to see Vision 2024 mentioned in the report as well, because it's fast approaching. Members, any questions? If you could use the raise the hand function, that would be appreciated. It just helps me. I think Councillor Sutherland's first off the bat there. Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. Jez, thanks for the presentation. Obviously, the really standout statistic is around crime, at least for me, where there's quite a significant increase. But obviously, at the same time, there's a change in how measurements are being made. What would you say, from your experience, we should read in this? Is this change partly a result of the change in how we're tracking the statistic, or is there quite a substantial increase in crime, or at least increase in reported crime that we're seeing?
Methodology is always something that is looked at in terms of capture. There is still a legacy of the post-COVID and the ways in which people are working and operating and living at home. So there is still some legacy from that. In terms of the work that the Community Safety Partnership are doing, that's one of the things that we're going to try and drill down in terms of what is the root cause of the change in crime figures. So we'd be happy to be able to bring that back or get a more detailed response on that for you, Councillor.
Could I just say as well, I've worked with Wendy Stevens to look into these crime numbers to make it more accurate, as Jez was saying, and she's part of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and the police and crime team. So what we've tried to do is align that up with West Yorkshire and the national police and crime figures to make that indicator more robust and to break it down. So as Jess says, it's not, because what does the total crime mean? So what we've tried to do is split that down and make it more, you know, more informative. So, okay.
Yep. Councillor, let me just see who's next. Councillor Dacre.
Do you want to take Councillor Porritt first?
Yeah, well, I can take, yeah, Councillor Porritt.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things that stand out for me. One is clearly it's been a really rough time over the last few years for our young people. I'm looking, obviously we've got the education outcomes there, which I know we're doing, to say that we're doing better than other parts of the area, yeah, fine, but everybody's not doing well, and that's really concerning. The fact that we've got, although we're still in the green for the young people's healthy weight, children's healthy weight, it's worsening. And also one that drew my eye was the worsening youth unemployment, the proportion of young people unemployed. And I think really just it needs to be really closely monitored how our young people are doing, and what the outcomes are like for them. And you know, I don't know how much of that is also maybe not the very young ones and their weight, but looking at youth unemployment and the crime figures, and whether there's any sort of concern there about if there's any kind of correlation. And yeah, just kind of looking out for our youngsters really.
Yeah, on the back of that one, Jez, what flexibility do we have? You know, are these metrics set in stone at this stage, or you know, because it makes sense to have the same metrics up until 2024, obviously, because that's the focus. Is there any ability to add in metrics at this stage, or is it cast, you know, set in stone and it's going to be a after 2024 endeavour?
The metrics can be changed. I suppose what we do annually, we look to whether we, you know, are bringing in a new SKPIs coming in or others going out. So you know, like crime has been introduced this year, more granular measures of that. The difficulty with putting measures in halfway through perhaps is you don't then get that benchmarking full year picture. So you know, things can be brought in, but we won't want to put a measure in for, you know, 1 quarter or 2 quarters and then find that it's not, you know, it's not going to be of use going forward, because you're not going to get that trend analysis. So each year, the 21 SKPIs, or last year might have been 20, it might have been 18. We've started off originally with 15. It constantly changes. So you know, nothing is set in stone. We've had measures around sort of the green measures and climate change, which have changed over time as they've become a bit more refined. So you know, if there's something that is an emerging priority for the council or cabinet or you know, then we will look to identify a statistically robust measure, ideally a SIPFA measure, something that other authorities are measuring as well, so that we can then benchmark it. So you know, yeah, nothing set in stone, but we would try to introduce it probably at the same time every year, so that we've then got a full 12-month picture that we can then draw some trends through.
Perfect. In the absence of any other questions, Jez, I recall from the last report you brought to strategy that you have regular meetings with the senior leadership team, and you essentially feed in these statistics, in which case they go, oh blimey, there's something wrong, or oh great, there's something right, you know. Are there any examples that you've got of presenting this to the senior leadership team and they've said, number one, this is great, you know, let's carry on doing it, but also number two, we need to improve this?
Yes, Chair. So it basically, if you look at the If you look at the report in the appendices, if you look at the exception reports, at the very bottom, you'll see a section called OPF feedback. And what that stands for is, so OPF is the Outcomes, Performance and Finance. That's Robin, the CLT group that meet quarterly. So Robin, obviously directors, and the CLT group, we meet under the bracket, under the umbrella of OPF, Outcomes, Performance and Finance, where this report and these reports are tabled and commented upon. So the OPF feedback is the response from the CLT group in response to the exception report that's being presented. So yeah, the report is presented, the CLT are given the opportunity to respond, highlight what their view is in terms of that report, and then these reports are all published transparently on our DataWorks website, so the public, this is available to the public as well. So yeah, it's a fully, from us preparing the report and the data to CLT under the auspices of OPF making their comment and recommendation in terms of the next steps action. So
okay, yeah, thank you, Jez. And then regarding the housing delivery test, could you just provide a bit of information on how that's calculated? Oh, sorry, Jez, you're on mute.
Yeah, there you go. Percentage of deliverable assessed housing requirement over a rolling 3-year period. That's the metric. We can share the actual full methodology of how that's calculated with Scrutiny. Yeah, if you need that.
Yeah, thank you, Jez. It's just because I think that's probably going to be it's not particularly a key thing for this panel, but I think it's going to be a key thing for the council over the forthcoming years, especially it's been mentioned about the local plan, and it looks like that will be going through. So I think that will be a key thing to monitor moving forward. Councillor Dacre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So really just following up on some of the things that have been said in relation to crime. I think it notes somewhere it does note somewhere in there that there's been an increase, for instance, in theft of cars, and that's potentially linked to I can't find where it says now, the increased value of car parts, and that it's something that's happening across the country, because we'll all know that the price of cars is going up, price of second-hand cars is going up. And indeed, I feel a bit anxious about this at the moment, because my car is waiting for a second-hand part, and I'm thinking, oh dear, I wonder where this is going to be coming from, because clearly it's very difficult to get traceability of some of those things. And I was at my ward forum the other night when the PCSO came along and said that there had been an increase in burglary and an increase in theft of cars. And he said, and this is because of the cost of living crisis and people being poorer. Now, quite what basis he had for that, but that seemed to be his take on the matter. In terms of healthy weight, I think what's worth adding to that is that Public Health have flagged up now that actually there's an increasing number of malnourished children coming forward, which is absolutely desperate to hear, and not something we want at all in our borough. And so that's causing concern and obviously is a focus of attention. In terms of young people unemployed, again, it's something we are very concerned about, because children who aren't in training or employment are obviously at risk of, well, they're just not going to have any money, that they're at risk of exploitation and all sorts of things, even at post-16. So I think some of you may already be aware, there's just been a framework put together with partners outside the council for a post-16 framework, which was done in consultation with those partners, but also with young people, specifically designed to try to ensure that we can do our best for all young children. And it focuses quite, although it's not only about children at risk of not, or young people at risk of being not in employment, training or education. It's got a very heavy focus on that and how we reach out to those people and try to bring them in and ensure that they're not just left outside with worsening life chances. And I think the only other thing to say was to follow up on your query, George, about, or Chair, about how the performance is followed up. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that Cabinet members are interested in the performance in their area, in their portfolio, and there'll obviously be discussions between Cabinet members and directors or whoever it might be appropriate if there are concerns or if there are congratulations to be handed out. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, sorry, I wish I'd said it before Councillor Dacre just gave her summary, because that was really interesting. But just on the healthy life expectancy, what is being done about that? I mean, how are we feeding that information back to government? I don't understand how we can have a healthy life expectancy of 64, yet we're going to be expected to work till 67. You know, it's just going to create huge problems, especially, you know, for sort of social care, public health, and for, you know, people being able to pay their bills, you know, cost of living, etc.
I don't know if you want me to just come back on that.
If yes, absolutely.
Public health have they have meetings as a group of public health directors, and they also have access to the relevant government departments. And this is the sort of thing that they will feed back all the time about issues that are arising in their area and issues that are arising because of inequalities and that occur therefore more in some boroughs than others. And it's one of those sorts of things that's discussed, in fact, not only by public health directors, but also by leaders of councils generally when they're talking to the government about how councils should be funded, because it's all about, if there are greater needs in one area, then the argument of many councils is that those councils should then be receiving more money. And those sorts of arguments and debates and submissions and pleadings go on to government all the time.
Yeah, perfect. Right. On that note, I'd like to thank Jez for attending. Thank you, Councillor Dacre, for your contributions as well under this item. Yeah, thank you very much. And we'll now move on to the next item. But thank you for coming. Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, then on to the next item. So the draft budget recommend consultation. So I think probably the best way before we proceed as a bit of keeping, we'll first of all go on to Councillor Dacre and Isabel, if Isabel would also like to comment, and then we'll ask members for questions. Councillor Dacre, how would you like to go about doing this item? Would you like to essentially a bit of preamble and then also go through each proposal in turn, or it's up to you how you'd like to go about doing it?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if Mike has anything he wants to say about that. It's just
Mike.
Thank you. I was just going to say that Isabel has prepared a presentation, but like several people this evening is having some connection problems. So Mark's got the presentation and is going to have a go at sharing his screen for the presentation, if that's okay with you, Councillor.
Yes.
Councillor Dacre. And I just remind the board that you've got sort of two roles this evening. One is to consider those aspects of the budget documents that apply to your own remit, but the other is to think about the overall council position, and we've circulated the paper with the comments from CYP, Children, Young People, Adults, Health and Social Care Scrutiny Board, and Place Scrutiny Board to you. Bella and myself will write a final report tomorrow and get that across to Cabinet for their discussions on Monday. So that's the process that's underway at the moment.
Perfect. Good. Isabel, welcome. So we are cracking on with this slideshow, I believe.
Yeah, you happy for me to try and share it, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll turn my camera off and hopefully I won't lose connection. But the presentation, see if it's going to come up. Brilliant.
Yeah, we can see that.
Thank you. Right. So if you'd like to go to slide 2. So I just put a sort of summary of what we were trying to get out of this meeting, just having a look at the medium-term financial strategy consultation and its assumed savings, just make sure they're scrutinised, really fully scrutinised, and those contributions are put towards the final budget report. And there's some additional alternative complementary savings that, although they don't form part of the balanced budget, I think it's relevant that we might have discussions about them either now or in the future. And they probably feed into part of our commercialisation sort of strategy moving forward, making sure we get value for money. And there's just a note at the bottom to say that the capital strategy will stay as it is, and we won't be changing sort of the programme for capital. But we will be doing a really large, we'll commence this month, and we'll be bringing that to the first quarter capital monitor. And that's to allow us to consider things that are obviously very high priority in the pipeline, such as, you know, the local plan, etc. Next slide. So just to kind of summary of my position for the budget. And when I think about a budget, I think about it as a number of components, and the key components really are the net cost of services, which everybody usually focuses on, which is obviously the cost of those services that we're delivering. However, there are other elements to our budget, and those include central costs such as pension costs, transport levies, adjustments, interest income, and they have to be considered as well as part of the budget process. Contributions to and from reserves, also very important, whether we're adding or removing money from reserves, using funding to support our revenue budget as well. And then the budget is generally balanced by the sources of external finance, and those include government grants and obviously the NDR, the non-domestic rates income. And finally, we have the council tax, and the council tax on domestic properties will be our other income source. And all of that builds together to give us a balanced budget. So the next slide is just a sort of those are what I would call the 5 building blocks of finance. And what I would say to anybody who's kind of looking at the budget is they're all as important really as each other. We often focus on the net cost of services. We often think where we're going to get savings and when are we going to generate income. And those are the areas we tend to think about. So our updated position, the next slide. Since I probably spoke to this committee previously, we have had some updated information following the financial settlement, and actually yesterday they did confirm the financial settlement. And as you can see, where we had a gap, and if I focus on 23-24, it's probably easier for us to do that today. We had a budget gap of about £10.2 million. Updates to the settlement gave us about £6.4 million, which helped us to obviously remove that gap slightly. And we have a gap now of £3.8 million. And next slide, please. We've taken into consideration as we push that budget forward, the pressures and the risks that we have in 23-24. So we've included contract inflation increases of about 11%. We've included staffing costs as well, and I think we've got about 3% at the moment in there, and we've got some additional money should it be any higher than 3%. Energy prices will be doubling probably, so we've got additional money within the budget to mitigate that. And realistically, funding from central government is declining in real terms, even though we have been fortuitous to bridge our gap with some of the additional funding this year. So the other additional pressures, the next slide, are a number of items that we've decided to put into the budget. We have some additional investment in early years because, as we know, the costs for early years are just increasing and increasing, and we currently have an overspend in that area as well. There's an additional £200,000 being put in to implement a housing standards enforcement team, and that will be looking at obviously housing standards across the borough and making sure there's consistency and that there's no negative impacts on residents. And the final thing that we wanted to put in as additional pressure was some headroom contingency. There are so many uncertainties for the following years that we really have struggled to give a sort of a robust idea of where we're going with all of the cost of living issues and all of the pressures that we currently have on all of our services. So we managed to put in a headroom contingency of £600,000, and we would hope, and you'll hear later on in my presentation, that we would hope to increase that through other measures, but ultimately we've managed to put that into this year's budget. So the next slide, please. The proposed budget savings for 23-24 are an additional 2% council tax income, and that will take the council tax increase to 4.99%, which is as we are allowed within the parameters that we're allowed to increase council tax by. And the impact of inflation and the interest rates going up has meant that the money we have got in the bank is actually worth more. So we have put in a proposed income increase for Treasury management income, and that is at 2.7 million. And then we also have an additional 300,000 where we're doing a review of our minimum revenue provision, which is a provision for repayment of debt, which we've engaged some external help to help us look at whether we've got the right profile of revenue provision for that external debt. So those are savings that we are very comfortable with, and that we think are tested and will be robust. Next slide, please. So if we put all of those things together, and once again, I'm just going to concentrate on 23-24. If we take the updated MTFS and we add in the additional council tax and the Treasury management income, we then put the pressures in of the housing standards enforcement and the children's investment, and we include our headroom provision of £600,000. We have managed to get to a balanced budget position, as obviously subject to the agreement of full council in a couple of weeks' time. But we think as a finance team that those are robust savings, and we're happy to take those forward. However, we do realise that the next few years there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So I don't think it's a case that we can sit on our laurels. So if we go on to the next slide, we think that we need extra headroom to be built in. As you know, the local plan agreement is imminent. We have the South East Calderdale projects. There are inflationary pressures, there's cost of living pressures, and there's also investment possibilities that might ultimately lead to investor save items, or there might just be investment possibilities that politically it stacks up for us to make those investments. So we need to be really flexible in the money that we've got and really make sure we have that real backbone behind us. So we will be looking at some other areas. Next slide, please. And the team have already started this work to kind of look at the items that we can look at, which are the review of the show. We're just having a look at that operating model and how best to preserve the asset there. We're looking at the car parking charges review, looking at how that can be implemented in the future. We're looking at buildings rationalisation and the buildings we have, what we can do and how we can use those. And we're looking at waste delivery and wondering how we might improve the waste delivery and how we might reduce our costs there. And finally, in that area, the highways programme, just checking that our expenditure aligns with our income, and can we confirm that that service provides value for money. So as you can see, there's a number of priority areas there that I'm working with my colleagues on delivering. And then the next slide, please. My team will be working on salary and corporate cost rebasing, which really is looking at all of the core service budgets, removing where we think there is residual budget, rationalising those budgets, centralising some of the things that have become, maybe unequitable across each of the services, making sure that the classification of agency costs, consultation is all correct, and making sure that we are maximising our grant income so that we can move forward with as much income really to balance that budget in future years as we can. So those are what we're working on at the moment. Then we also have a future plan for later on in the year, and that's my last slide, if you don't mind, Mark, that would be helpful, which is the other options, which I think we will need to look at to make sure that we have a really robust budget for future years. And that's a benchmarking review of fees and charges, an MRP review, which we are starting already, looking at that capital funding, look at that provision for repayment of debt, making sure we get proper local government funding review advice. So there's lots of flexibility with how we can manage our local government funding, and we just need to make sure that we make the right decisions in order to maximise the income that we get from central government. Reviewing our treasury management initiatives, which is really key to making sure that we're maximising the income, and the consideration of the capital strategy. Can we afford that capital strategy on an ongoing basis? Can we afford the whole programme? Should we be borrowing more money? Can we afford to borrow money to invest in items? So there's a big review, and as I said, that will happen and will be presented to Cabinet in the first quarter monitor. And I think that's it. So just questions and feedback, really.
Perfect. Well, that was very organised, very polished. So thank you very much, as always, Isabel, for that one. Councillor Dacre, would you like to obviously come in at this point before questions? And members, feel free to use the raise the hand function whilst we're listening to Councillor Dacre.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So yes, thanks to Isabel for that, which means really I can just perhaps concentrate on just a few points. So I'd just refer you to the leaders' opening to the budget, which I hope you've all read, where it refers to the three principles that, as far as the consultation budget was built around, which was investing in social care, maintaining existing spending levels on frontline services, and delivering a robust and balanced budget with prudent provision for the uncertainties of the next 2 years. And as Isabel has indicated, we've been in the position where we haven't had to make any cuts this year, and that's just really good news. But as Isabel also mentioned, we're still looking at long-term cuts to the budget, which makes it extremely challenging. And Isabel again has touched on some of the things that make it challenging, and that's, well, it's inflation, but there's also, of course, the fact that we ended up with yet another 1-year settlement, which makes it exceedingly difficult, but it's impossible to plan. And it was especially disappointing because in the summer we'd been promised a 2-year settlement, and that didn't come. And of course, the perennial point to remember is that as the funding's going down, so does the call on our budget for adults and children's social care. That includes the elderly and working age disabled. And so those two things mean that an ever increasing part of our budget is taken up by those items, and it's now roughly 70%. So there's just this dreadful squeeze on everything else, like the bins, like parks, like almost everything else that most people think of as your public services. And also, I think you've heard about the rise in the council tax, and that's taken with a very heavy heart, because we know it's a very difficult time for a lot of people, and people will struggle with that. And we can offer help to the worst off by means of the council tax reduction scheme, but even they have to pay something towards it. And we also have a proactive team at the council who are there to help people who are starting to get into difficulties, so that we can find ways around to help them and to avoid them ending up in court or the bailiffs being called. And I think Councillor Lynn was saying the other day that most people who were contacted with that help have been really positive about it and really pleased that the council's been proactive about it. But we don't underestimate how difficult that is for people. And I think this just highlights that the problem that the government announced spending increases for councils of about 9%, but it assumed in that figure that councils were going to raise the council tax and the adult social care precept by the maximum that they're now allowed to do, which meant that you could effectively be getting that 4.99%. If you didn't do that, and if we hadn't done it, then it meant cuts. So what is being presented as a budget increase is dependent upon council taxpayers in each area. And for councils like Calderdale, where we have a majority low band properties, we don't raise as much as the leafy parts of the south of England. And this will not be solved. And one of the reasons we're all having to do this is to pay for adult social care. And this inequity will not be solved until there is a long-term solution of funding for adult social care on a national level. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen before the next election. And general local government finance reform, which is badly needed, and every council across the country will say this to you, it's needed, and are saying it to the government, it's needed. That's not going to happen until after the next election either. And so at the moment, we're still in this position where to pay for adult social care, which is our statutory responsibility, council tax goes up. So you've heard that there's two areas of investment. I'd just like to say a bit particularly about the housing improvement. We as a cabinet just felt that this was so important. We're looking at the Grenfell report coming out at some stage shortly. We all know about the death of our Abbey Shack in Rochdale through mould. So these posts are going to enable the council to much better work with both private sector and in some cases not-for-profit housing, social housing landlords, to try to ensure that housing is a proper standard to enable people to live without risk to their health. And the other, we feel this is in line with our priority of tackling inequalities, but it's also in line with our commitment to climate action, because one of the other things that they'll be doing is enforcing energy requirements on housing that rented housing is now supposed to abide by. So we think that is really important and much needed. And early years, it's a very fragile market out there, and we are concerned that we are likely to be called upon, because although we don't provide this, we have a responsibility that it is for it to be provided, and or we don't provide all of it. We think it's highly likely that we are going to have to call upon some of that during the year when providers get into difficulties. So I don't think I'd particularly want to say anything else. So yes, it's over to questions for both of us.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's quite ironic when you read that the rise in interest rates could be helping the council, but it's also biting us all. It's quite an interesting point, really. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Just going on the council tax, and just wanted a question on a couple of assumptions. So, does it assume that we'll have a higher rate of default this year in terms of council tax? I understand from, I think, if I recall a previous meeting we had, I think we had quite a high rate of direct debit payments in Calderdale, especially in comparison with other local boroughs. Which obviously would help that, but A, is that right? And B, what sort of assumptions have we made with regard to council tax default and how that will impact upon the budget?
I think the council tax collection rates, we haven't reduced our council tax collection rates, but actually we are performing in this particular year, we're performing better this year than we were last year. So I think it's still quite prudent for us to keep that target rate at the same level. So I'm comfortable with that at the moment. But like you say, we need to keep an eye on it. And I get regular updates from Robin, who is my council tax manager.
Is that okay, Mike? Yep. Councillor Carney?
Thank you, Chair. I find it quite a unusual thing, really, to be able to speak to somebody about this kind of thing, and they're speaking about it apolitically. So, thanks very much for the presentation, Ms. Britton, because obviously that's the angle from which you come from. Now, with that in mind, that you mentioned that there's potentially unknown risks to the budget, and that's the reason behind the 0.6 million contingency. And that'll protect us from going into deficit, and if things crop up. But I was wondering, does your experience in with what you do mean that you can give us an idea of the sort of things that are likely? I mean, I sort of imagine that's probably an impossible question, but if I don't ask, and you have got that,
I think it is an impossible question.
Right.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but even on a daily basis at the moment, as I'm looking through budgets and looking, and people are sort of flagging things up with me, I'm seeing variations in budgets every single day of what we thought would happen and what might not happen. Now, some of those might not be material, and they might just be something very similar, like I don't know, the cost of a product going up, and it meaning something, it costs more money, based something that we possibly hadn't thought about. But I think we just need to be prepared to have that money behind us, and if we don't actually need that for the sort of the issues that might arise, then at least we'll have some money to do some kind of investment. And that's another opportunity that we as a council have been talking about. We talked about commercialisation, but it might not be investment in something as spectacular as a building, but it might be investment in a new system that generates a saving across another service, for example. But I think that we definitely need to have that opportunity available to us.
Absolutely. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, a similar question to what we asked at the place scrutiny about the additional funding for housing, standards enforcement. Does that have any possibility of generating income through fines and things like that? I know it's a bit sort of back to front, but I just wondered if there would be any.
Yes, I think the answer to that is yes. There is a possibility of that. We've put a prudent amount of money in there because we might not generate fines in the first year, or we might not generate any income in the first year. It depends. The structure would still need to be worked out, and how that. There's a number of different structures across different councils as to how they might run that enforcement. But we couldn't rule out income generation. So we've just made sure we're prudent about the cost of implementing that in the first instance.
And the focus is definitely going to be on the enforcement. That 200,000 is going to be, on enforcement officers, because I seem to remember it going to be spread over other costs as well. And I just wondered if you could clarify again what that was. Sorry about that.
I won't pretend that I've got an exact model of how that will work out at the moment. I haven't got that to hand, but it would be the drive for it would be the enforcement of making sure that obviously properties are safe and within the standards.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I can add to that if you want.
Yeah.
So the position was, yes, it funds for members of staff. It's just that I said that they all would come under Derek Ben, and in fact, it's also in legal and also in, where was the other one? Building control. So it was, they aren't all in one place, but it is staffing effectively.
Perfect. Councillor Porritt?
Thank you. Thinking back to the workshop that we did last month and talking about commercialisation opportunities, business plans for different departments, I presume we're anticipating that has the potential to relieve some budget pressures at some point. I know it's all very much at the beginning stage, but I wondered if you could sort of talk about that a little bit for us, please.
Yeah, I definitely think that if we have a proper handle on what the delivery of each area is, and we understand that, we've actually caught up as a leadership team on Tuesday morning to talk about this with the extended leadership team, making sure, I mean, we took your comments on board that we need to know how many business plans they are, what they're going to look like, and how soon they're going to be delivered. And one of the key things we need to know is the cost of each service. And that's going to obviously help us to evaluate whether that is a value for money and what can be done. Do we need that to be a gold service or a silver service, or, you know, I think there's lots of opportunity with that business planning, because if nothing more, it's opening people's eyes to exactly what they're delivering in their service, and whether that delivery method or the delivery outcomes can be changed or improved in any way.
Good, thank you very much. A quick question from me. So on page, what is it now? Page 9 of the report I'm reading the specific report. So it's not the agenda pack, but it mentions there could be savings in the future. There's going to be officer focus groups going to review parking charges review, building rationalisation, salary and cost rebasing, waste delivery review, highways, and the highways programme. I'm very cautious about these things when it's saying here's the budget, but we're also considering other savings that we'll introduce mid-year. What, and obviously it's difficult to say because we don't know what the savings would be at this stage, but what councillor review mechanisms are in place to review those savings?
So what I'm doing with the team at the moment is we've just got these small focus groups to deliver those reviews. What we will do is include those in the monitor. So as the quarterly monitors come out, you might well see, for example, if we suddenly found, I don't know, a £200,000 saving by looking at salaries rebasing, just as an example, you might well see, well, actually, there might be an overspend in one area, but actually a deep dive review of the salaries has found that there's a 200 grand saving in this area or across the council. So that's mitigating that saving. I mean, I think it's, as you say, it's quite complex. It's a complex thing to do a mid-year saving. But I think if we're working alongside service budget holders, and we're talking to them at the same time, we're stopping them possibly from spending money and possibly from not using money that where they maybe don't need to use money, and really trying to tighten those budget controls. And that's only going to be done with some really detailed work with my team and those budget holders, really getting into those budgets and understanding what people are spending money on. If I'm honest, I can't give you a sort of a total answer on that. I've delivered this before, and I've delivered it mid-year, and it's what it has done is it's just given some contingency money in the background to mitigate those additional pressures, and to make sure that as we go into the 24-25 budget, that we've then got those savings already there. We don't have to go through the process of saying what we're going to save, how we're going to save this money, because we've actually already trimmed and trained those budgets so that we are, we're in a better position. And that's what I'm hoping we're going to get to. That's what my vision is, really.
I think thank you, Isabel. I think it's ultimately a good idea, because it provides flexibility. Ultimately, the bit obviously which I'm concerned about is that democratic accountability element. Now, so therefore, would these reviews, would they produce savings? I mean, savings in terms of cuts. That's what I'm getting at.
They might produce savings, but those savings would be included in part of the budget, whichever budget they would affect. So we wouldn't change. I suppose what I think what your question is, when we go to budget full council and when we say, we're going to spend, I don't know, £10 million on A, £20 million on B, £50 million on C, those totals will still remain the same. We will not be changing those totals. We will use the contingency pots behind the scenes in order to make sure we've put that money safely away. We won't be coming to you one quarter and saying, the net budget is 180, the next month, the net budget is 178. It will always stay the same for monitoring purposes, and that will keep that makes sure that the democratic governance process is kept in a consistent way. Where we find savings, we will show you where those savings are and how they might affect the outturn on any of those budgets.
Perfect. So the budget, the service budget would remain the same. So that's a comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the level of service could change to produce that saving, or not saving, but the saving to reinvest.
We can't change a service significantly without it going through proper process anyway. What I'm probably looking at is things where there's maybe unnecessary spend is probably one item, or whether there's budgets that possibly aren't used. So a budget is set, but actually the outturn is different. It's also a thing about realignment, because I know that there are possibly areas where one budget is considerably overspent and another is underspent, but in a department that might net off. And it might not be significant, but what I want to make sure is that our budgets completely reflect what our spend is in each of the areas, so that we have a really consistent and transparent approach.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. I think just where I was coming from is, I think I've outlined it. Obviously, I always like everything that we sign off to be what we get. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So I'm just making sure that we don't get something mid-year, which we certainly didn't anticipate. That to be no democratic means to obviously.
That's definitely not the position. No, anything that needs to be anything that's a change would come through the correct process in order to do so. A lot of the stuff I'm probably talking about is more of a tidying up exercise, a sort of back office function, and that sort of area. So it's not massive changes in any of the service provision.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you, Isabel, for that.
It's okay.
So, any other questions from members? And then I'll bring Councillor Parsons-Hulse.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I feel suitably reassured, Isabel. I mean, it's a really difficult time that we're all living through right now. And yeah, it's just like you're looking under every stone. And I really feel, yeah, I really appreciate that. So yeah, obviously as members, we are going to get the backlash of the council tax increase, and with people saying, what am I paying for? All the usual questions. I'm wondering what we can do as councillors, really. What can we do to explain to our constituents that actually this is for adult health and social care? You know, is that something that we can do as a council? Because it is going to come as a backlash, isn't it? And maybe, I don't know whether you can answer that, obviously, Isabel, but maybe Sylvia or someone. Thank you.
I think Sylvia's got a really good model that shows what every pound is spent on, isn't it? Haven't you, Sylvia? We talked about it when we did the briefings, and it kind of really demonstrates that for every pound of council tax, that there was something like 67 pence spent on social care. And I think that if we share that maybe around, that might be more helpful for you, right, just to demonstrate. And I'll stop there and let Sylvia jump in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, I'll arrange for it to go to Mike to be distributed, I think. I mean, the difficulty I had, it was sent back to me in a slide pack and I couldn't extract it, but it is, it's the what is your council tax spent on, and it's pictorial, so it's easy to grasp. But the other, it's difficult because the other point is that the thing that the reason why it's getting like that is because overall funding is going down and the cost is going up. And that's, I mean, what I suppose it might be useful, and I might ask Lee to fish out to some of the older ones which show how I think they were done most years by Nigel or by somebody for Nigel, and you'll see over the years how the amount on adults and social children has gone up, and the amount therefore for everything else gets squeezed because the pot isn't expanding with the demands upon it. So I'll certainly arrange for that to be done. And I know it is really difficult, and we do know that. But it would be.
I'd really appreciate that comparison. So if we have something from, say, 10 years ago, this is what I always explain to people, you know, this is what the council used to have, and now this is what and we still have to deliver the same amount of services. So I was trying to explain that, but having some visual thing. I have used that pie chart before to try and get the message across, but it is really difficult. People don't get it. And I think maybe we need to get something out in the media to explain actually what their statutory responsibility is, you know, because ultimately that's the bottom line, isn't it? We all want more services, but in the current state, the financial state, we're just, that's not going to happen. So anyway, Isabel, I feel really reassured that you're on and you're looking on every stone. So yeah, thank you.
I do wonder whether the other thing as well, Councillor Dacre, that we can share is if you take funding as a block each year of the same amount, and you have a percentage, the percentage reliance on council tax is greater year after year after year. Yeah. So your central government funding is going down, so it becomes a smaller percentage, and there is more emphasis. And what Councillor Swift talks about in his opening statement is about the sort of the drive of that spending power, and the spending power is assessed on everybody maximising their council tax. So we don't really have any choice, otherwise we fall behind everybody else, because if we don't increase our council tax, we lose the base of that, and obviously we lose that percentage wise. And a lot of councils, when they didn't increase council tax over a number of years, which is what happened previously, that solid base of income that came in just depleted, and you ended up with a much lower baseline. It was very difficult to build up. So I think maybe that might be another one that we can get Lee to dig out. That was one of Nigel's probably.
Thank you.
Okay, can I just make one other comment?
Yeah. So I want to come at the end, Councillor Dacre, but when I didn't know if you wanted to come in at the end, but whenever you like.
Well, yeah, there's only one other thing, I think, unless anybody had any of the questions that I was going to say, which was just on the discussion you had with Isabel about the future investigations. And I think, as Isabel said, just the important thing to, I can't even find it now in the document, to just bear in mind is that if, as a result of anything that happens during the year, it's appropriate, then proposals would have to go through the appropriate governance procedures, which would involve papers to cabinet and the possibility of scrutiny being able to scrutinise them. So nothing, because something's done in year, doesn't mean it escapes scrutiny. It's still, there's a process that always has to be gone through. That's not to say there will be, but if there were to be, those processes are there for democratic oversight by boards like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, this one, because for me, full council and a vote at full council is the bastion of pure democratic process, and that's why I always think if it's mentioned in the budget documents, then I always prefer that it does get, whatever the saving is or whatever the proposal is, it's signed off by budget council. There's always when there's a will, there's a way, and there's always a way to get things through and pass through other means. I'm not saying that would occur, but I just want to make sure there's certainty on that. But I think we can square this circle with scrutiny, and I think by incorporating it into the work programme, these focus groups, reviewing these focus groups into the work programme, I think we can square that concern of mine. So yes. Good. Are there any other comments, members? No. Good. In that case, I'll bring in Ben. I think this is Ben's first or live scrutiny meeting, first scrutiny meeting with everyone. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself first of all?
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name's Ben, Ben Marshall. I'm an assistant scrutiny officer working alongside Mike and Bella, who I guess all of you know. I started in January and I'm primarily helping Mike with the CYP scrutiny board and this board. So you will probably get quite familiar with me over the next couple of months or so.
Perfect. Welcome, Ben. So over to you, really, on the budget and next steps.
So with, for example, building the review of the 5 initial review groups into the work programme, what I would propose that we do is work out which scrutiny boards are the most appropriate to consider them. And then when those proposals are produced, if we could be let know that, and then we can add them to the relevant work programme at the relevant time. And obviously scrutiny boards can make recommendations to Cabinet as to their views and to any recommendations they wish to make about the proposed course of action. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Mike?
Just to say, Chair, that we will get the report updated and get it to Cabinet by Friday morning. But we'll probably need to contact you, Councillor Robinson, to sort of just talk about the detail of that to get sign off. But that will include a summary of this evening's discussion alongside the discussion at the other scrutiny boards and a brief report on the work you did on commercialisation and enterprising council. That's included, so there's an opportunity to cement the work you did at that workshop that I think members found very valuable in January into that report as well. That's all, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of process, Mike, do we need a vote just to, or is it Because usually,
I think you need to confirm, yes, that everybody's happy. But Councillor Dacre has her hand up. I don't.
Yeah, Councillor Dacre.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think it's perhaps something we need to discuss now, but perhaps if Mike and you, Chair, can just discuss and clarify that when it would be appropriate for things to come to scrutiny. I'm just thinking in terms of if sort of cabinet papers, when would they come to scrutiny? And they couldn't necessarily come before they were cabinet papers, if you see what I mean. So I don't quite know how you'd work that. So I just think that needs a discussion with Mike and Ben,
yeah,
Ben and yourself, Chair, about how that could work.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and yeah, we can have a discussion offline. Yeah, good. So are members happy with that course of action? Then in that case, we're going to package everything up and present it to cabinet essentially. Yeah. Do we need a formal vote, Mike?
It's probably best if people put their hands in the air, yes, if they're willing to.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll propose that as a formal course of action. Can we have a seconder? Sorry, everyone's got their hand up. Mike Barnes, are you happy to second? Yeah.
I'm fine, Chair. Fine. Not a problem.
Perfect. And then we'll take it to the vote. All those in favour, please. Perfect. Any against? Good, and that's carried. Perfect. Well, thank you, Councillor Dacre, and thank you, Isabel, for coming. Greatly appreciate that. Mike, are you wanting any last words?
Only to mention, Chair, that the work programme is the last item on the agenda. We've got the update on the workforce strategy coming. Jackie Addison is coming next meeting with the update on the workforce strategy. We haven't anything else on that agenda, so if members do have anything they'd like to include, email us and we will talk to Councillor Robinson about building it in. Councillor Barnes has his hand up. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, go on, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I mean there are a couple of items which are to be rescheduled after October 2022, being one, which is the Corporate Equalities Progress Report. And then to be confirmed autumn 22, the final report, council-sponsored cost of living crisis. It's a pretty light agenda next month, and that's not being disrespectful to the agenda item and the individuals concerned. Is there any particular, and also we've got the retaining Northern Talent, which Councillor Robinson was interested in. That might be a bit late for that because that might have a bigger impact upon, that might be better off waiting until the new corporate year. I accept that on the municipal year, but I'm just wondering what about the others.
Yeah, go on, Mike.
Sorry, Chair. The cost of living crisis, that actually should have been taken off the forward plan because we did approve the report. And
yeah, I thought that, Mike. So that was me being a little bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah, thank you for spotting that, Councillor Barnes. And Councillor Kearney and Councillor Swift, Tim Swift, are in conversations about actually getting that to cabinet at the moment. Yeah. We can certainly look at the update on the equalities report and talk to I think it would probably be Tahira about that, but we can explore those ideas, both those ideas. For it is quite a light agenda, so we can certainly have a look at that after this meeting.
I'm not complaining about it being a light agenda in March, but I just think if we're going to get together, it will be worth having a little bit more meat on the bone, so to speak.
Okay, so myself and Ben will talk to Councillor Robinson about whether we can bring those items forward. And
thank you, Mr. Lodge.
Isabel has her hand up, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, just on quickly on the back of that point, I think we had to move an item out for the 15th of March. I think it might be because the officer wasn't available. So but if there's any suggestions about what members would like to bring in, I'm very reluctant though, caveat, I'm very reluctant to bring in things for the sake of it, just for the purposes of shoehorning something into the agenda. I'm very reluctant to do that.
I appreciate that, but you know, when the corporate we asked for a 6-month update, and that is now almost 12. It will be 12 months since that update. So I know you say, I know you're right, you're on and in, but you know, it is now, quite late.
No, well, you know, I appreciate that you're always hot on the heels of these things. So no, I do appreciate your attention to deadlines there. But as always, if there is anything any member would like on the agenda, then please do let us know. It's also getting to that time of year as well, isn't it? It's February. You know, it's getting to that when we're gonna reinvent ourselves for another year to come. So it's getting to that time. Isabel.
I was only going to say that when we did the in-person workshop the last time, we did say that we would take a meeting in the future, and we would maybe carry on, because we only did half really of what we wanted to do at that workshop. So maybe not for the March meeting, but maybe for the meeting after. I don't know what the group thinks, or we could do with the combination at the next meeting. But there's definitely some opportunity for us to further take the work that we were doing at that meeting forward.
Yeah, Mike.
Sorry to interrupt. If Isabel's able to do it for the March, it would make sense to have it with the same committee that looked at the first one, because, as you pointed out, things might change come the next one. So if Isabel feels that she can get it all done and dusted for that, I would be happy to defer to that, purely because it would be the same people involved in it, and that would be in much greater consistency across the piece.
Yeah, so doing something about that in the March meeting, that's what we're getting. And if that's okay with Isabel, you know, if that's
I think we talked about doing a visioning session, didn't we, to kind of just see how that worked, and then we could probably just defer onto some of the business plans and talk about those going forward. I'll talk to Mike Colgate, because he obviously had a good idea of what he was going to do anyway. Yeah, I can do that.
Perfect. I think the other point, which is important to know, is that workshop we attended. It was brilliant. It was really good, and I think everyone who attended thought the same. It allowed us to actually engage with officers on a personal level and find out the detail of what's going on. And I'll be so bold as to say that was by far the best scrutiny session I've attended. We got more done in that workshop environment compared with this environment. You know, so it's almost like you sat around the table with officers rather than, you know, a question and answer. So my question to the board, and it's not one for now, but moving forward into the next year, when we come to set the work program, are those sessions and incorporating them something that we'd like to do more? I think that's definitely a question for us that we need to just ponder over the coming months. Mike.
Sorry, Chair, you more or less said what I was going to say, which was that when the new board convenes in June, is really to think about making a couple of your meetings at the very least sessions like that, because I know, and the reaction I got from all of you, I think was very positive about that session. Yeah,
I would be fully in support of that, because the progress we made was very, very good. Anything else, members? Good. Well, it's an exciting time for the Strategy Scrutiny Board. The big things ahead, it would seem. So I want to thank all members for attending. Isabel, thank you. Thank you, Mike and Ben, and thank you, Mark, as well. So thank you for attending, and I'll see you next time.
Mark, can you transfer the host to me?